Hello, once again, wonderful humans. Welcome back to Board Game Dads. My name is Anthony, and I have again a very special guest. We are just coming at you left and right with a special guest this summer. Another Board Game Dads first on the channel. Our first ever scientist. Scientist, please introduce yourself.
Hey, so I'm Clara Barker and I live in the UK, in Oxford, in fact.
And Clara agreed to meet with us a little bit here today on Board Game Dads. I gave her a list of potential holidays to discuss, and I'm glad that she picked the one that she did. I'm glad somebody picked this one because there's one of my picks for this category I really wanted to talk about because I haven't been able to play this game in a really long time because of the high player count of it, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. But a couple of questions for Clara before we get started. So you're a material scientist, which is something I had never heard of before. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, so even more specifically, I'm a thin film superconductivity material scientist. So I make superconducting materials, but I think thin film materials are all around us. So my glasses, they have anti-reflection coatings, they have anti-scratch coatings. These are all thin film materials. And so I've made similar kind of coatings to that in the past. If you have a packet of crisps and it's got metal on the inside to keep it fresh, that's how I got into it. I made the machines that put the metal on the inside of the plastic to keep your crisps fresh. And it was like, oh, this is kind of cool. This is really interesting. But yeah, at the moment I'm making superconductors, which are really weird materials. They have zero electrical resistance when they're cold. So it means I get to play with liquid nitrogen. And whenever, not that I've been able to do it for a while, but if I have a school tour, I'll get the liquid nitrogen out and have my floating superconducting track. And yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah, that's always a big hit when that comes out. It just
Yeah.
fills the room with magic. That's great. So how long have you been in that field?
Oh my goodness, too long. To the point where I can't remember. So I guess. Oh no, I really don't know. It must be around 15 years, something
Oh wow,
along those lines. So I did my undergraduate, and that was in engineering, and then I worked for a company that made those machines. And
hmm.
quickly, I was kind of like, "Hey, what's this material stuff?" And so that's when I kind of when I transitioned, as it were.
That's cool. That's an interesting story. Well, I'll think about you now every time I open up a new bag of chips or crisps,
There you
as you call
go.
them. Um, so, in addition to that full-time job, you also spend a lot of time as an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community, specifically with STEM programs, right, and some other things as well.
It's across the board, really. So I'm the chair of the LGBT plus advisory group to Oxford University. So I never imagined that I'd be on these like super high panels at Oxford University, but here I am. And so I'm doing that. I'm the Dean of Equality and Diversity at one of the colleges at Oxford now. And then I'm also on other various boards. So the Royal Society's Equality and Diversity Committee, which is kind of cool. It's again the sort of places that I never expected I'd be. So my main focus is LGBTI plus inclusion and advocacy, but obviously I don't want to do that at the expense of other diversity. So it's good if we can work together and try and bring that, yeah, like I say, work together to improve the science culture rather than just LGBT inclusion.
Right, right.
Although it's like I say, it's what I end up talking about most of the time. But then I also do youth work as well. So I run an LGBTI plus youth group and a group for parents and carers of LGBTI plus young people to give them a place to get information and meet other parents. Yeah, I just ran my last youth group on Monday night. And so it's great when you have young people that are really nervous and quiet and shy and they come
Yeah,
along and they've never met anyone else that's LGBT.
right.
And within a few sessions, you can't shut them up. And that's like, I love it. I
Success.
love it.
No,
Yeah.
that's great, especially like you said with the parents, because that's something that, obviously the individual is going through a lot of things in their own head, right? But it is something that affects the people around them as well. And sometimes we forget that those people might not know how to, accept that thing or deal with that new relationship. So that's great that you work with a bunch of people involved. So
Sorry,
no, go ahead.
yeah, just a quick point. But in the UK, in England, until 2003, there was a law that meant we couldn't talk about LGBTI plus people. So my entire school career, my first degree, you weren't allowed to talk about being LGBT. Teachers weren't allowed to be out. No one was. There was no books, and that's only 18 years ago. So
Yeah.
even though that ended 18 years ago, our teachers, our parents, our carers, they went through a time when they didn't have this exposure, and we didn't have the internet. We had 4 TV channels. And so, it's not their fault that they don't necessarily understand what's going on these days. It's not necessarily their fault that they're behind. So I want to do everything I can to give them a little bit of confidence to be able to do the best for their kids.
That's great. That's great. So, because you're so busy, you probably every once in a while have a problem that might come up in your professional or otherwise life and career, and you probably try to blame someone else for those problems, right?
I mean, professionally, I never blame anyone else. I mean, if a piece of equipment's broke, I'm not blaming my other researchers for breaking that equipment. They just broke it. That's not my fault.
So I bring that up because today's holiday spotlight is on a very strange one called National Blame Someone Else Day. This was one that caught my attention when I was looking at the list, and as soon as I read it, I thought, well, there's definitely some games where you're pointing fingers and accusing people of doing something or perhaps not doing something. A little bit of history here, and again, this is from the website nationaltoday.com. Says that National Blame Someone Else Day began one Friday the 13th in 1982 when a woman by the name of Anne Mole's alarm clock failed to go off, resulting in a full day of bad luck. And so now we have the luxury to enjoy an entire day of blaming other people for all the bad things that may have happened today or in the past or even in the future. So hooray for that. Don't think I'm really going to go around celebrating this holiday, but hey, it gives us a reason to talk about some fun board games.
Yeah, exactly. It seems like there's a lot of blame flying around at the minute, but
yeah, that's true. All right, so in this sort of magic circle of the board game realm, Clara, what's the first game that you would like to talk about that involves some passing of the blame?
Yeah, so maybe this is more of a social deduction game, but the first game I'm going to talk about is Deception Murder in Hong Kong. So in this game, everyone has a secret role. One person might be one person is the DM, the forensic scientist. So it's nice to have the little science link in there. And then another person is the murderer. And so the forensic scientist has to get the other people to guess not only who the murderer is, but they also have to get them to identify the right. There's 2 rows of items and then evidence. And so you have to get the right combination of those 2 things. Otherwise, the case is bust. So it's all about trying to, But of course, as the murderer, you're trying to push the blame onto someone else. It's like, well, it was clearly them. They have, why else would they have pills? Why else would they have a notebook? It's clearly them.
So now, when these roles are passed out, is the one forensic person in open information, or even that's hidden as well?
So at the start of the game, all the roles are given out secretly. Nobody knows, and then they're revealed. But then once the forensic detective knows that that's their role, then they will say that, because then they have to try and get people to guess who the murderer is. So a little bit like Werewolf, where you certain people do know the roles, but like I say, the person that's the forensic scientist really does act as a sort of a DM, in the same way as in Mysterium, it's the person giving out the clues.
So what other roles are there then besides murderer and the lead scientist?
So there's the murderer, there's the lead scientist, and then everybody else is an investigator. But if you have a larger group, there are extra roles as well. So there might be a witness. So the witness might know who it is, but not what they used or how they did the murder. And also, if you guess who if people manage to pin the murder on the murderer and they know exactly which bits of evidence, they get one chance to say, well, I think this person's the witness. And if they're right, the witness disappears and the case goes away. So there's also that. There's also an accomplice who will do everything they can to try and misdirect other people. I believe, so I haven't played the expansion, and I believe that there might be a few extra roles in the expansion, but to be honest, I've always played with the base game.
This sounds really fun. This sounds like a really amped up version of like Clue.
It's great. I mentioned my youth groups. It's a game that back when we could have physical in person youth groups, I used to take it along, and it was the game that got played more than anything else. I mean, they're not quite playing the rules right, but it doesn't really matter. They're enjoying just blaming each other and shouting at each other and just trying to blame somebody else. So it's a really good group game. I've played it in groups of my peers, and it was really good fun. That's why I bought it. But then it works so well with young people as well.
Do you have a preference on which role you play?
I like to give the clues, but sometimes, so as with things like Dixit and Mysterium, sometimes you're very limited, and the clues that you give, you're like, this means nothing, but I've got to give a clue. And so it can be quite frustrating, but I like that. I do like being in one of the detectives when you're guessing. I don't really like being the murderer because I am terrible. Like, I have no poker face. People know when I'm the person, I've forgotten the word now, but they know it's me. I am dreadful at it. I was playing the computer game, what is it, Among Us recently, and it was just, everyone knew every time. Even over the internet, my poker face let me down.
That's funny. I feel the same way. I'm not. I feel like I'm put on the spot. I feel like I instantly turn a different shade of color, and it's to the point where I get kind of nervous. That's why I'm not a huge fan of those types of games. But with the right group, like you said, it's definitely it becomes just really about having the fun. It's almost irrelevant, like who wins or loses that game.
Oh, it absolutely is. Although so my technique to try and get over that is I start giggling before we know what the rules are, so that I'm trying to do it so that I'm still giggling, and so there's no change, and that's the only way I get away with it.
Nice, that's funny. All right, so my first game is similar here in that you're going to get some hidden roles at first, although in this game there's only really two types of roles. You're either loyal or a traitor. And the way you set up the game is the traitor card might not even be in the mix, which is interesting. And this game is called Shadows over Camelot. This is quite an old game now. I think maybe 2005, or it's probably one of the oldest games that I have in my collection. But yeah, you get that card face down. You're either loyal to the kingdom or to the crown, or you're the traitor. And then you get to be one of the knights of the round table, and they all have a different ability. This game is pretty sprawling. There's a lot of like different boards that you set up. It looks intimidating upon first glance, but it really isn't. The whole mechanic is really hand management, and it's funny you mentioned poker. You're pretty much making poker type hands in this game. When you go to these different quests around the board with your knight, you're either trying to play cards in numerical order on a certain quest, or like two or three of a kind on a certain quest. And so you're all doing this together, and you're communicating and talking about, who should go to this quest and who can help you on this one. Because every time you complete a quest, you get some rewards. But if you fail the quest, there's some consequences. And this game makes you do bad stuff, which I love. You can do as many heroic things as you want, but before your turn is over, you must pick one evil thing to happen. You can draw one of the black cards, which are all bad, or you can add a siege engine catapult to the center of Camelot there. And if you get, I think, 12 total, you lose. Or you can take a life point. And, talking about trying to deceive people, if you are the traitor, one of the best ways to throw people off your scent is to take a life point, take a hit early on, because you only have, like, I think 4 or 5 life points overall. You can die in this game. There's player elimination. Have you played this one?
I haven't. I remember seeing it on the YouTube channel. Was it Tabletop on Geek and Sundry? I
Yes.
think
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
played it on that, and that was quite early on when I just got back into board games, and I
Yeah.
really wanted, but I just never saw it. I never saw a copy, or when I did, it was super expensive.
Yeah, I think I looked at it today in preparation for this, and I think this might be a game that I own that's out of print, which I didn't think I had any of. But not that I'm going to get rid of it anytime soon, but I'm certainly not going to get rid of it now. And it is the game that I was talking about that I really miss getting to the table. It's
Hmm.
so much fun, and it really does shine at a higher player count. I believe it plays up to 7, maybe 8 with like an expansion, which I don't have. Um, but cool miniatures in this. There's each knight has their own. There's picks and saxons that you're fighting against, little catapults, and then there's even Excalibur you can get, and I forget there's the sword and the stone and all kinds of stuff, and they all do different things. And it's just great fun. It's kind of a sandbox type game. You really can trounce around the board wherever you want, and at some point you can say, look, Sir Lancelot is up to some no good business. I can tell the way he keeps getting rid of these cards that we need, and you can blame them. And if you're right, that's great. Now the traitor's exposed. The traitor's not out. They're going to do everything in their power still to defeat the good guys. But you have more of a target, and then you get to point fingers. And the Monty Python jokes are aplenty during this game, like constantly.
I think it is. Yeah, it's just rife for those Monty Python jokes. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah.
But I do also like the fact that when the traitor is outed, it doesn't end the game, right? It still carries on, and I think that's a kind of neat mechanic. It just all of a sudden you'll have to shift in the way the game's being played, and
Yeah.
it's another thing that I think is really interesting.
And I believe as the traitor, you can even choose to reveal yourself at some points when you feel like the jig is up. Because I think if you do that first before getting accused, then you won't give points to the good guys. Basically, the way the end score works is a big round table of these swords that are white and black. White are good, black are bad, and majority is going to win the game. So for all the bad things that happen, you're going to put some black swords on, and then some good things can let you
Mm.
flip them to the other side. So it's a fun one. You can actually come into this game like after it's been started playing, which is pretty unique as well. It doesn't really happen that often.
Yeah.
And if you really don't want to have a traitor, you can choose to play this game fully cooperative. Take the traitor card out, and then just play to win. You still have to do those bad things along the way. But I like having the card might be in the deck. Because I've played a game of this where you're almost certain somebody is the traitor, and the game ends, you're like, wow, nobody was the traitor. We were all loyal. And it's just funny. It's just great fun.
It's great seeing the sort of distrust. I love it.
Yes. Great. All right. So, Clara, what's your second and final pick here for Blame Someone Else Day?
Yeah, so my second game is, and I have the box here,
Aha.
Room 25. I'm not putting this in the camera very well. So, Room 25 is, I don't know if you've seen the movie Cube. The Cube.
No.
It's an older horror movie, and a lot of people wake up and they're all in these different rooms, and then some of the rooms are trapped, and the rooms move around, and they try to find the exit basically. And Room 25, I mean, it just captures the essence of that film. Absolutely. It's really good. So it's another game where you can play it, you can play it cooperatively, but you can also play it with a hidden traitor. And I also like it where you could have it so that there might be one traitor, there might be two traitors, or there might be no traitors, but you're never really sure. And I think that's where it shines, when you're not sure whether there's a traitor in there. And so it's also a programming game, so you have to choose what you're going to do at the start of the round, and you're against the clock to try and find the exit. And so it might be that someone will do something, like maybe they'll push you into an acid pit, but you've already programmed that you're just going to look into another room, so you can't move out. So you can be tied into those things so you can be eliminated during the game. But it's really good fun. And also, if you kill someone off, they don't have to reveal whether they were the traitor or not. And so it leads to this really interesting situation. I was once caught right at the beginning. Like everyone, I just started giggling. Everyone knew it was me. And so I got thrown into an acid pit like on the second round, something like that. Like I was just killed off straight away. It was so early in the game that everyone forgot that I'd been playing. So as the game went on, I started sowing little seeds of distrust and paranoia amongst the other players. Like, oh, that's really suspicious. Do you think they're the traitor? Do you think that person's a traitor? And so by the end of the game, everyone was at each other's throats. No one knew. Everyone was throwing each other into the acid pits or the blades. And I'm just sat there laughing to myself, watching this all go. So in the end, like I think only one person escaped, and I think that counts as a fail because all the good people are supposed to escape. And as soon as the game finished, they were all blaming each other. As soon as the game finished, they all looked at me and went, "Wait, it was you! How did we forget that?" It was glorious.
That's awesome. Yeah, you must have basked in that one for a while. That's
It's
that's
not
that's
very
so satisfying.
it's not very often you get eliminated in a game, and yet it's way more fun that way.
Yeah, really. So how does the time track work in this game?
Yeah, so each round, the order that you're going in, there's a the 4 players or up to 6 players with the expansion, and then the person that goes first one round goes to the back, and that sort of moves up a timer
Okay.
so that once one person reaches, say, the 12th round, then that's the last round, and so everyone has to get out before the end of the round,
Hmm.
and it's a neat little mechanic, and it doesn't outstay its welcome. Like I say, most of it is just arguing with each other,
Right.
but it doesn't stick around too long. It's a good game, and it's definitely one best played with 4 or 5 players. And like you say, with Shadows over Camelot, it's best if there's how many traitors are there? Is there a traitor? We don't know.
Yeah.
That's the best way to play it.
It is. I mean, you don't get that tense feeling in a lot of games. There's are we going to win? Are we going to lose? Or how am I doing? I'm behind. I don't know what the score is. But when you're completely unsure of just if something exists or not, that adds a whole new level of like meta. Just I'm worried about what's happening here. So it's definitely a different experience than a lot of the other games. Now, does this game have expansions to your knowledge?
It does. So there's three. I think there's 3 official expansions. So I have season 2. I've got that in my game. That adds in robots and extra rooms. So different rooms do different things.
Hmm.
There's also a VIP small box expansion, which adds even more rooms. There is the only one that I haven't played, which I have, is there's one that adds in kind of an escape room aspect. So you've got to solve codes, but I've never actually played with that expansion. I bought it when it came out, and it's
Hmm.
just been sat on the shelf for ages. So they're the main ones. I know that they also released an Ultimate Edition a couple of years ago, but I'm not sure which of the expansions are included in that. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's still in
Cool.
print, which is good.
Yeah, I would definitely check that one out. The downfall of learning about all these new games is they just keep going on a list to play, and that list just keeps getting longer and longer. But that one sounds like a lot of fun. The thing that's weird about some of these games is they can be very group dependent, right?
Mm.
Because you have to be in a group that enjoys being deceitful a little bit or doesn't mind being lied to. It's definitely something that not everybody enjoys. I talked about Sheriff of Nottingham recently,
Mm.
and my wife can't stand that game. She won't play it. She doesn't like being put on the spot to lie or not lie or discern if someone's lying, and so it's not for everyone. So definitely feel out the group. I think before you launch one of these. Um,
Yeah.
my my last pick here, I think, is a good way to sort of test the waters for this type of game because it's pretty short and there's not a lot of rules to it. And this one's called Spyfall. There's 2 versions of Spyfall now, and also a DC Comics version, which I've never played. But the original has basically just a whole bunch of different decks of cards, and each deck is a different location. So it could be a casino, it could be a battleship, it could be a restaurant. And you'll pass out these cards face down, and they all have the location on it, and then a role that you are at that location, which you can choose to kind of play with or not. I think the game works better if you do. So, for example, if the location was restaurant, you might be a server, you might be a customer, you might be a delivery person, and thus you would answer questions a little bit differently depending on who asked you that. So everyone will get these cards, and one person gets a card that just says spy. So the spy does not know where the location is. So that's their objective, to deduce what the location is. Everyone else knows where they are, but doesn't know who the spy is. And basically, all you do in this game is ask questions. You can ask anything you want, with the exception of you can't ask someone a question who just asked you something, but it'll make its way back to that person eventually. But the magic happens when you're the spy and you get asked a question that is specific to the location that you don't know, and you might get asked very early on in the round and have like zero clue at all, right? And your answer might be so ludicrous that you immediately give yourself away as the spy. But if you're lucky enough to last a few questions, you can start to gather a little bit of information from how people answer. And again, you can ask someone, what are you wearing to this place today? Or, are you here for business or pleasure, and things like that. And again, it's a group dependent game because a lot of people, I've had success and not so success with this game. Some people just don't like trying to craft the questions, and they don't know what to say, right? And then they inevitably ask a yes or no question, which are not always helpful, and they can then be blamed for being the spy, even if they're not, just because they don't really have the constructed questions to sort of ask to lead people a certain way or the other. You play around, I believe it's like 8 minutes, but again, you could play it for shorter or not even do a timer if you want. And after a certain amount of time, you can stop at any time and accuse someone of being the spy, but everyone has to agree with you. And if you're right, then the good guys win. If not, keep going. And if the spy at any point can be like, stop, I'm the spy, and you are on the spaceship. And if you're right, congratulations, spy wins. If not, you shuffle up and deal them again in a different location.
Yeah, it's a really neat game. I like the fact that it's all different decks, and so you just pull a deck out, and like you say, there's a timer, so you play the rounds, but you can choose not to. Um, but I'm terrible at this one. If you're the spy, it's not so much when I'm asked questions that I struggle. It's trying to ask questions if you are the spy. I really struggle with that. So this is like peak me being bad at these sort of games. And it's a shame because I think I like the artwork. It's a really fun game. I've had great experiences, but I am dreadful at it. I really am. But it's another one I've considered getting for my youth groups because just to watch the chaos ensue,
this
I
is
think.
definitely a game that you can just watch and not participate in and almost have as much fun.
Yeah.
I was so intrigued by this game before it even came out. Someone had made a file, I think, of just the location and roles or something, and I printed up just like index cards and made like my own decks, and was very excited when I finally got the game. But this one is so short, and you don't have to play any amount of rounds. You play as long as you want. And if you take this game with you, like traveling, you could just grab like 4 or 5 of the decks. You don't have to bring the whole box. It's not a very big box anyway, but you can do that. Haven't played the sequel. I don't know if they're able to be combined or not. I think the DC one adds another element to the game, and I just don't remember what it is.
Ooh.
But I think there's something else you can do, or maybe there's 2 spies. It's something like that. And I guess it's all DC, locations and things like that. I don't know. I'm more of a Marvel fan, so.
Yeah, I was interested with the DC property. I thought that was kind of cool. But again, I'm not very good at it, so it's not one that I feel I need to have in my collection unless I get it from my youth groups. But at the same time, I won't say no as long as I know that the group will be a fun group to play with.
Exactly. And again, it goes back to that. It's definitely a group-dependent game for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to play it with people I don't know at like a board game conference or something. I think I don't know. It could work.
It could. I think that might that might cause the most like delays and downtime, I think, right? Because then you're compounding it with, I don't know this person, I don't know, how to phrase a question for them. I don't want to offend them in a certain way. So that would, yeah, that would make it a little more difficult, I think.
Yeah.
All right, my friends, we're going to start to wrap things up here before we start pointing any more fingers. But before we leave, Clara, where can everyone find you on all the social media platforms out there?
Yeah, so I have Twitter as Clara Barker and Instagram, I think the same, and YouTube as Clara Barker. So I talk about all sorts on my channel. Sometimes it's science, sometimes it's social justice. I've also been doing a lot of mini and diorama painting videos and board game reviews. It's a me channel rather than a specific channel. It's just what I enjoy.
There you go. I like it. I like it. Awesome. And I'll put some links to those things in the description of this video as well, so you guys can check that out. In the meantime, you can subscribe to Board Game Dads if you have not already, and keep an eye out because next week coming up is our live show where we're going to be wrapping up the summer block party. So keep an eye on that. We're going to feature a bunch of your comments and questions, and I hope somebody watches because it's just going to be me and Eric talking to each other otherwise, which is fine, but we'd love to hear from you all as well. All right, my friends, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank Clara again for taking time out of her schedule to hang out with us for a little bit. And until next time, we'll see you later.